Hello, sports fans. My name is Scott.
And I'm Ash, and this is the Extra Point Podcast, where we bring you sports from a generational perspective.
We've got the old
and the young,
and we're going to bring our thoughts and feelings about different sports during the course of the year. These sports will include baseball, football, maybe some others.
A man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild. We have the technology.
Swing and fly ball. Deep right. Are you kidding me? And there's the 2-2. He got it. 34 years.
Okay, to give y'all a little bit of information about ourselves. My name is Scott. As I said, I'm a retired high school teacher with a deep love of sports, particularly the Atlanta Braves and the Georgia Bulldogs.
And I'm Ash. I'm a new fan of baseball, and what brought us both together was our love for the Atlanta Braves.
Me and Ashby are neighbors. We're not related to each other. We just have a common love for the Atlanta Braves. For today's podcast, we're going to talk about baseball. We're at the halfway point of the season. Seems to be a good time to talk about what's occurred so far this season and what we think is going to occur during the second half of the season. We're going to go division by division, starting with the American League East.
So number one spot in the AL East is the Tampa Bay Rays, and for an obvious reason. They have had an amazing season so far. They started off their season 23-6. That's 17 games over 500, and amazing to start off a season. Right now, they're 57-30, so that's about 27 games over 500, but they're only 10 games over their past 58 games. This is a very hard division to be playing in, so I'm very happy that they have that number one spot. Not only do all the teams in this division have a over 500 percentage, they also all have positive run differentials. So it's going to be definitely tough to maintain that number one spot, but Tampa Bay is rocking and rolling, and I have high hopes for them for the rest of the season. Coming up next is Baltimore. They seem to be Tampa Bay's number one competitor this season. They're 49-34 with a .590 percentage, which is amazing. Nobody expected them to have such a great season this year, especially after the past few years. So it's just awesome that they are doing that. High hopes for them as well. Next is the New York Yankees. The Yankees are 47-38 with a .553 percentage. They are also doing good, and they have been falling behind at some points, but they are maintaining their number three spot. Next up is Toronto. Toronto, they have an amazing infield and outfield. They have amazing players, but the pitching is the thing that's going to most likely let them down in the future. Right now they're 45-40 with a .529 percentage. And coming in last is Boston. They're 43-42 with a .506 percentage, but it's still a great record, especially in a division this tough.
I hope everybody enjoyed that brilliant analysis of the American League East by Ashby. I get the easiest division to talk about, the American League Central, which is without a doubt the worst division in baseball. Currently, the first place team is the Minnesota Twins, who have a 43-43 record, .500 baseball. If you took Boston out of the American League East, they would be leading this division by half a game, even though Boston is in the last place in the American League East. The next team, the Cleveland Guardians. I still have a problem with that name. They are sitting 2 games below 500 at 41-43. They're a game out of first. They got a negative 10-run differential. They've got a chance at the playoffs simply because of the division they're in. That's going to be their only hope, and that's going to be a common theme for the rest of this division. Third place team is Detroit Tigers. They are 37-46, 9 games below 500, 4.5 games out of first, and they've got a whopping negative 76 run differential. They're being outscored by almost a run a game. Fourth place, Chicago White Sox. They are 37 and 49, 12 games below 500, 6 games out of first, negative 58 run differential. Again, as with the other teams, their only hope to get to the playoffs is to win the division, which is 6 games out with 80-something games to go. It's possible. Now, the last place team, I feel very confident in saying they have no chance at making the playoffs. And that's the Kansas City Royals. Kansas City is a proud franchise. I feel so bad for their fans right now. They are sitting at a record of 25 and 60. That is 35 games below 500, and they have a negative 135 run differential. They are being outscored by an average of 1.5 runs per game. These are truly horrible numbers. It's this division. There's 4 teams that have a shot, but there's not going to be any wild card teams to come out of this division.
For sure. They are all looking very pitiful, and like you mentioned, the only reason they would ever have a chance at the playoffs is because simply the division that they're in. So definitely a pitiful division, as you mentioned. Now moving into the AL West, the last division in the American League. Number 1 is Texas, and for a great reason. They've also had such an amazing season. They're 50 and 35 right now with a .588 percentage and a positive 155 run differential.
It's amazing how many runs that Texas has scored. They've got the number 1 offense in baseball along with the Braves.
Yeah, they definitely have high hopes for the future. Now on the comeback is the Houston Astros. They were World Series champions last year, but they had a very rough start this season. But right now they're on the comeback. They're 47 and 38 with a .553 percentage and a positive 58 run differential. So that is good for them. They're starting to come back. So Texas may have some competition coming up soon. The 2 Texas teams. Next, number 3 is the Los Angeles Angels. They have 2 of the best players in baseball, Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. However, they have a very slight chance of making the playoffs. It's almost like they're cursed. They're 45 and 42 with a .517 percentage and a positive 26 run differential. Then, moving down is Seattle. The Seattle Mariners, they're 41 and 42 with a .494 percentage. They are 8 games away from number 1, and they have a positive 18 run differential, which is good, especially looking at their record. And then we go into one of the most terrible teams in baseball, the Oakland Athletics. They're 23 and 63. They have a .267 percentage, and get this, their run differential is negative .237. They are absolutely terrible. And right behind them, like we said, is the Kansas City Royals. The A's are terrible, and mainly because of their owner. Their owner is a terrible owner. He has made terrible draft decisions and trade decisions. The players that actually gave the team potential, he traded them away.
The Atlanta Braves benefited from this with Matt Olson and
Sean Murphy.
Sean Murphy.
So I bet he's probably looking at the Braves and thinking, maybe he realizes, maybe he doesn't. I also feel very bad for the fans there. Talking about, the reverse boycott that they had. I mean, he's letting the stadium go to waste because he wants to move them to Las Vegas. Why would he waste such an expensive stadium to go to Las Vegas?
And the A's are a very proud team. Look at the A's back in the early 70s. That was a great ball club. It's really sad to see what's happening in the city of Oakland right now.
For sure. It is not a happy thing. That's a wrap on the AL West. Now we're going to be moving into the National League.
Okay, we just wrapped up the American League divisions. Now we turn our focus to the National League. Ashby has graciously allowing me to do the National League East. Two reasons that I really enjoyed doing the National League East. It's got my favorite team, the Atlanta Braves. It also has two teams that I am not such a fan of, and that's the Mets and the Phillies. And if you're an Atlanta Braves fan, you understand why I'm not a fan of the Mets or the Phillies. First place in the division is the Atlanta Braves. Atlanta Braves have a record of 57-27, 30 games over 500, got a positive run differential of 141. Texas, Tampa Bay, and Atlanta are the only teams that have positive run differentials of over 100. These are by far the three best teams in baseball.
And one thing that definitely, I think, contributes to Atlanta being really good is the fan base. The fan base is active. They support the players. You know, they're always active and helping out and showing their love and support for the team. And I think that definitely has a big contribution to why the team is good.
And this is a good example of showing the difference in ages, generations. Ashby, this is his first year of really following the Braves, and the Braves fan base has been fantastic this year. However, I remember periods in the 70s and 80s where you were lucky to have 5,000 people in the stands because the Braves were absolutely horrible. Typical of most teams, when you're winning, you get a lot of people in the stands. When you're losing, not so much. I want to see the Braves keep winning.
For sure, for sure.
Now, second place team is the Miami Marlins. Miami sits at a record of 49-37, 12 games over 500. They're a good ball club, but Atlanta has done so great that they're 9 games behind Atlanta. With 80 games to go, 9 games is a big lead. Can't be overcome, but it's going to be difficult. Also, Miami's lucky. They've got a negative run differential of -21. For a team 12 games over 500, that's fairly amazing that they are -21 on run differential.
Shocker that they're at number 2 in.
Which leads us to the third place team, the Philadelphia Phillies. They are the National League representatives in the World Series last year. They are an example of a team that got hot at the right time. They got really hot going into the playoffs, and they rode that streak all the way to the World Series. This year, they are 44-39, 12.5 games out of first. Their best bet for making the playoffs is going to be as a wild card team. It remains to be seen if they're going to make the playoffs or not. Next is the New York Mets, the bumbling, stumbling Mets. Mets have a huge payroll. They spent big on free agency last year, and they don't have too much to show for it right now. They have a record of 38-46, 8 games below 500. They are 19 games out of first place. I feel very confident in saying they are not winning this division. They also have a -12 run differential. Again, the Mets are just not that good of a team, and despite the fact that they got one of the highest payrolls in baseball. The last place team, Washington Nationals. Washington they're just not a good team. They're in the rebuild mode right now. They are one of the few teams that I can say confidently is not going to make the playoffs this year. And that wraps up the American League East, National League East.
Now moving into the NL Central, it's pretty much the AL Central if it was slightly better. So you have the first 2 teams, which are the Cincinnati Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers. They are both tied for first. They have a 46-39 win-loss ratio, and they both have a .541 percentage. However, the Cincinnati Reds have a -19 run differential, with Milwaukee having a slightly better one with a -14 run differential. Now is the Pittsburgh Pirates coming in at number 3. Pittsburgh does not have a great win-loss ratio. However, they're having a good season relative to them. Pittsburgh, they are 39-45 with a .464 percentage, and they have a -40 run differential. Now, coming in at number 4 is the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs, they're 38-45, so they've won one game less than the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they have a .458 percentage. However, despite having such a bad record, they are the only team in this division with a positive run differential. They have a positive 22 run differential. Then coming in last is the St. Louis Cardinals. So St. Louis is 35-49 with a .417 percentage, and they have a negative 25 run differential. So even though they don't have the lowest run differential, they are still in last place in this division.
And considering the history of the Cardinals, they're having a bad year. St. Louis usually puts out good teams, but not this year.
So that wraps up that division. Now we're going to be moving into the final division, which is the NL West.
Now I get to do the last division, the National League West. A little side note here. Baseball did a horrible job teaching geography to young kids back in the 70s and 80s, because you had National League West consisted of San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and the Atlanta Braves. Why you would have the Atlanta Braves in the National League West is beyond me, but that's the way it was. Now, this year's version of the National League West. First of all, we start off with a surprise team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. They are in first place with a record of 50-35. They got a positive 37 run differential. They're having a good year, surprisingly so. Next is the Dodgers, LA Dodgers. LA is not as good as they've been in the last 5 or 6 years, and it's showing up in this year's record. They are 42-37, 2.5 games out of first place. They do have a positive 61 run differential. The Dodgers are a good team. They're just not as good as they used to be. Third place, San Francisco. The Giants are 46-39, 4 games out of first place, positive 35 run differential. I really have no clue if what's going to happen with them for the rest of the year. I could see them winning this division. I could see them dropping to the bottom. I just don't know. Fourth place is San Diego. San Diego's like the Mets. They spent a lot of money on free agency, and it is not paying off for them. They have got a record of 39-46. They're 11 games out of first place. They do have a positive run differential of 30. But like the Mets, they spent a lot of money, and those two teams are probably the most disappointing teams so far to their respective fan bases. In fifth place is a team I feel confident in saying they have no shot at the playoffs or winning the division, and that's Colorado Rockies. They are 20 games under 500, 33-53. They've got a negative 142 run differential. That's on par with the Oakland Athletics and the Kansas City Royals. Again, they're just not a good team. I feel very confident saying they're not making the playoffs this year. And that wraps up the 6 divisions of baseball. Now we're going to give our predictions for the end of the year. Who's going to make the playoffs, who are going to be the division winners, who makes the World Series and the World Series champion. And we will come back to this in the end of baseball season and see how good our predictions were.
And now welcome to the last portion of our video, where we're going to be talking about and conversing about who we think is going to be the wild card, who we think is going to win the division, and who we think is going to the World Series. So we're going to be starting off with the American League. For the AL East, Tampa Bay takes the bag easily. However, Baltimore and the New York Yankees are going to be both wild card teams. Then in the AL Central, Minnesota takes the win for that one. Then heading into the AL West, we have Texas taking the win, but Houston is a wild card. So then for the American League, going to the World Series is the Texas Rangers.
Okay, it's amazing how great minds think alike, because we're almost identical. I have Tampa Bay also winning the American League East. I have Baltimore and New York also being wild cards out of that division. In the Central Division, I'm really torn between Cleveland and Minnesota. I'm going with Minnesota because while Minnesota is a very mediocre hitting team, they do have really good pitching, and I think in that division is going to be enough to pull them through. In the American League West, I'm going with Texas Rangers winning the division. I'm going with Houston winning a wild card, and then in a slight difference with Ashby, I've got Houston coming out of the American League, representing the American League in the World Series. Now we're going to talk about the National League. Now for our National League predictions. In the National League East, and a blowout, I have Atlanta winning the division. I think they're going to win by 15 plus games. However, I do have a wild card coming out of the East, and that is the Miami Marlins. I think Miami's shown enough to where I think they're going to be a wild card. In the Central, I've got two teams coming out of the Central. I have Cincinnati winning the Central Division, but I also have Milwaukee coming out as a wild card team. In the National League West, I think the Dodgers are going to come in and they're going to win this division. But I do think Arizona is going to cling to a playoff spot and come in as a wild card. When all the playoffs are done, I have Atlanta coming out of the National League playing Houston in the World Series.
So, similar to you, Atlanta takes the bag easily, but Miami also does come out as a wild card. We do kind of differ on the NL Central. For the Central, I have the Milwaukee Brewers coming out with the win and the Cincinnati Reds ending up a wild card team. Then in the National League West, I have the Arizona Diamondbacks taking the win and the Los Angeles Dodgers as a wild card. And then, all said and done, I have Atlanta taking on Texas in the World Series.
And in the World Series, I have Atlanta beating Houston in 5 games.
And for me, I have Atlanta beating Texas in 4 games.
Thank y'all for watching. Please leave in the comments what you think we've done right, what we've done wrong. Give us constructive feedback. And
make sure that you hit that like button if you like this video and want to see more of our content. Make sure you subscribe to the Extra Point Podcast. That's all for today. We'll see you guys next time.